FreeFall Magazine acknowledges that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7, which includes the people of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani, the Tsuut'ina First Nations, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, and the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Thank you.
Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us for tonight's launch of FreeFall Magazine number 31, Volume 1. We have a great evening of music, prose, and poetry to bring you. We also have a raffle at the end, so the only way to enter, of course, is online, so just comment either on your Facebook if you're watching us on Facebook, or if you're watching us on YouTube, just make a comment at some point in the evening, and that will enter you automatically to win 1 or 4 book packs. I'll announce the winners at the end after the video's over on social media, and I'll reach out to the winners personally as well. That's all I'm going to say today, so enjoy yourselves, and we'll see you after the show.
Hi, my name is Eliot Kelley, and this song is called Floating. Floating in the water, floating in the sea, floating out to nowhere, comes floating back to me, giving life and taking, drawing breath and exhaling, look so demanding when you're staring down and ending. But I'm floating in the water, floating in the sea, floating out to nowhere, comes floating back to me. Love's excessive, enthralling haze. I stop and gaze. Floating in the water, floating in the sea, floating out to nowhere, comes floating back to me. It comes, it comes, it comes, it comes, it comes. It comes, it comes, it comes, it comes, it comes. It comes, it comes, it comes, it comes, it comes, giving life and taking, drawing breath and exhaling, look so demanding when you're staring down and ending. Love's excessive, enthralling haze. I stop and gaze. Floating in the water, floating in the sea, floating out to nowhere, comes floating back to me. Floating in the water, floating in the sea, floating out to nowhere, comes floating back to me. Back to me, back to me, back to me, back.
Hi, I'm Russell Thornton. I'm quite a fan of FreeFall, and so it's a pleasure for me to have the chance to throw a poem into the proceedings here. for the launch of this new issue. This is called The Fine Print. No one reads the fine print. You sign your name, you initial, you check a box, you click submit below a page full of text. You acknowledge, you agree, and later you are referred back to it. The benefits you thought would be automatic. The fine print dictates otherwise. You're too old. No, you're too young. Your medical history has been flagged. You didn't mention a criminal record. Yes, you made monthly payments year after year, but the fine print was always there. And the conditions attached to your claim, stated in lettering so small and concentrated that it all runs together and becomes a slow black river, were always determining your little fate. It's as if the fine print was written for you on the day you were born and was meant to hold until your memorial service. The eulogy, the prayers, the songs, the large photo of you will say that you were this, and what is about to happen to you is this and this. No one reads the fine print. And the river of lettering wouldn't stop if you did. The qualifying, the disqualifying, etc. You acknowledge, you agree. It's only below the surface current that you can move in accord with a different current. Here where you are always starting again. And there is no fine print to read or not read. And you owe nothing and you want nothing. In the black flowing of the undertow. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Catherine Graham, and I'm delighted to be in this issue of FreeFall Magazine. My thanks to the team. I'm going to share 2 poems. This first poem is titled, A Person is Wounded for Every Bird Shot. Ice blossoms slip through fingers that don't exist. Wish on my back, a code for smaller. Butterfly guardian for one big thing. Pincushion my heart. Sing. And this next poem is titled Thirst. Your red hair rose, we never had. Petunias pink-packed in the window box, pouting for dry as pitch, water. Planter's peanut can, we bucket dip to rivulate the leaf-shade dirt. The pouring disappears. Your dry, caked lips sponged by my fingertips. Thank you.
Okay, hello. My name is Dustin Moon, and I'm going to be reading a small excerpt from my story, Hey Little Tomcat. Okay. The apartment door clacks open, the hinges squeak twice, and then reshuts. Sam peeks through the crack in the bathroom door at Tom, pretending she understands privacy. Then she steps 3/4 in. Her arm elongates up the jamb, sheathed in the white and pink stripes of her sweater, and her wavy brown hair hangs in the air from her tilted head, accentuates the natural rouge in her cheeks, and a handful of freckles that never faded. Tom says, privacy maybe? Her eyes are judgmental. What the hell are you doing? I'm having a bath. People have baths past age 6? Tom doesn't reply. Well, is it nice? Tom sighs, but it's a different sigh from the nasal one he treated me to. This sigh is exaggerated, coupled with his head slunk against the wall. A friend's sigh. Want to know what we're doing tonight? Tom says, I have a pressing Netflix schedule. You have, she starts, then Tom plugs his nose and slips under the water. When he resurfaces, his wet hair thick and stuck to his eyebrows, Sam is still talking. Town, and there's a new place on Broad we haven't been to. Supposed to be awesome and friendly. And guess who texted me this afternoon? Jake. O'Donnell, Clara's older brother. You met him at Tracy's. Sam continues, and Tom listens vacantly. But his evening is set, he is no longer in control, and his bath is over. Nonetheless, we're going to fast forward now, because this is Tom and Sam's relationship. Good friends from 9th grade, later best friends, later inseparable, each other's gatekeeper. She's changed since high school, too. She always partied, but her glee has drained with each soiree. The color in her face peaked in the first year after high school. Fun became escapism, then became a drug. She didn't feel different, but she harbored something deeper and invisible, something that gained on her like age, and she raged against it through her uneventful mall job and eagerness to socialize, meet boys who told her new insights about herself that she secretly already knew but loved to hear, and her refusal to let silence exist when music could fill every void. But she was losing, and soon she won't be able to pressure Tom out of the bathroom each time. These are truths Tom observes, but Tom doesn't really observe them. He uses them like a mirror to evaluate his own sense of self. The difference? Sam doesn't take sad baths. So we will fast forward past the bus ride Tom and Sam take downtown, wherein Tom tries to avoid eye contact with a couple across the aisle in defiance of common PDA rules, past the meetup with Clara and what's-his-name outside the club on Broad Street. And yes, unfortunately, we must pass Tom's time inside the club, a spacious den, drinks, people in the throes of the latest top 40s hits, cranked through speakers of subpar quality, past Tom's waffling at the bar, 1 screwdriver, 2 screwdrivers, a request for something sweeter. He couldn't hear the bartender over the din, so it became a game of lip reading. Past the sweat of the place, the sweat in the finer points of his sideburns, the sweat of others in his nose, past the relentless need not to be there. It doesn't matter that I was there too, because I couldn't get to him in there. I sat across the dance floor on a raised level, hand on the railing, and watched Tom at the bar. Watched him waffle, drink, request a sweeter cocktail. Watched him play with the condensation that formed on his glass. Wring his hands and then tried to fail to find Sam in the jungle of limbs. I watched the humidity overwhelm him. But the place was too sensory to reach him, loud and dark and bright. And how is this night different from the previous ones Sam forced him to attend? Outfits may differ, cuter one night and less inspired the other, and the names of people shift, but not enough is different, and Tom is a romantic. He is so desperate to be interesting. Tom leaves the club without ceremony. He does not tell Sam. He can't even find her. I want to thank FreeFall Magazine and everybody involved, and Crystal McKenzie, and everybody who still appreciates and reads and consumes short stories. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. It means a lot to somebody who's just trying to break into this industry, so thank you.
My name is John Barton, and I'm about to read you my poem, Aubade. I've been working on this poem for many years, and it has gone through many different versions. It is a delight to have one of them at last see the light of day. Aubade. Slumber lists you into the slight, unsteady blur of your rocking chair, ear pressed against a flaw birthmarked across your shoulder. Your cradled horse rider's hands could be a cartographer's, drafting rangelands unknown. The violin you'd bow, aching to map out scale. By day, your fingers restring constraint, their tips primed to restate a cloudy pianissimo, my throat a bruised crescendo. Your lips, dry and parting, subdivide my heart. One half a crooner, the other a Mustang, rushing the gate wind has rasped shut. The hinges unhinging me. Magpies cavil in the cottonwoods, cobalt with gloom. Your face the moon gone full. Mars a gilding, thunders inside the tight-skinned corral of my ribs. There is no other weather. Nocturnes, not cleaving or breaking us. Unsaddled horses ford starlit night spaces, waded through to be drunk from. The laconic sky drained of discord. I sit not far from you while you sleep, chilled and thirsty, charged by the appetite heat obtains. Light stampeding back in when I slip off your clammy, dawn-scored shirt. Congratulations to the editors of FreeFall. It is a delight to be part of this magazine.
Hi there. My name is Frances Boyle. I'm in my home in the city of Ottawa, which is on unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin and Anishinaabeg territory. I'm very pleased to have my poem Wayfaring in FreeFall, and I should just let you know that it's a prose poem, so if it feels a little bit run on and breathless, that's because it is. Wayfaring. Unhinge all logic to find an idiom closer to the miraculous intensity of the world. The world is too much with us, always, but we don't let it burn through. Don't let our soul take the lead, stand watch. We need to guard against what guards us, well-meaning but wrong-headed, from feeling too much, from not knowing what it is we're feeling. As if feelings were labels, emotions from a list. That therapist gardener early morning gave me a pillow. Pummeling helped me open up to the pain, and the pain sang through me like the wind icy through caverns. And I felt exhausted and empty and alone and ready to begin. Always used to talk about the crack in the egg, the threshold of a breakthrough, the doorway I'd walk through, the new naked self I'd be once I shed this skin, the new naked pink flesh that would be revealed, the new wholly open way I'd wake into the world. A structure will come, Rumi says, when I lie in a zero circle. How do I get there? Give in to the dumbfoundedness. I have to get to the letting go, the freedom that comes of giving up and taking the day by its moorings, the shaggy ox, stark black tree branch scratch gray of the world, and big things like death just a piece of all the smaller things. I think of my friend's murdered son and wonder how she will survive, what will get her through this. Wonder where the one foot after the other momentum comes from. Felt myself just make my jaw unclench, let the tension in my gut let go, disperse a little. How have I got myself tied in knots? I'm useless at work these days. It's my priority setting, the boss says, and I don't think I want to go down this road. I open myself, but my eyes are misting, not with tears, but with the dim light and my dim eyes, and I'm getting old and fearing it. Fearing being less and less relevant, fearing the time that I've wasted, how I haven't been able to build my blocks as I want to. I need a doing meditation, a way to create order and open myself to chaos. Clean house, desk, office, and a cluttered heart. Clean lines, that wind blowing, that sun making light despite the clouds that allows the light to be gray. How can I struggle so? Where's the kindness I give to everyone else but withhold from my own precious self? I remain a pilgrim on the very first step of the dusty way. I've been traveling for so long, but finding detours, wrong turns, diverting caverns, and the odd vista that I had to stop and stare at. Stop and cry at just how big it all is and how small I am. Each step a new beginning. Each step is an affirmation, even if it doesn't feel like it. Am I tapping into the green current, the charge, the live wire, the fuse that runs through it all? Keeping going is the point, they say. But why am I so tired? Yes, I am often and always dumbfounded. Let the space before and after just fall away. Let me be just on this narrow path that is the only one I can follow. Thank you for listening.
Hey, I'm Fraser Calderwood. My story, Radioactive Green, from the new issue of FreeFall, is semi-autobiographical, but I also took inspiration from a Raymond Carver story, Bicycles, Muscles, Cigarettes. So I thought I would read the section I wrote after that Carver story brought back a childhood memory. Here goes. Stu was a cool dad. Whenever he returned from a work trip, he brought new action figures for his 2 sons. Their house was up the hill from ours, on a street that capped ours like the upper stroke of a T. When I'd see his van out front, I'd get jazzed, knowing that what he would have brought with him. The figures we most desired were the Toy Biz X-Men figures. Stu seemed to know the names of all the X-Men, and even which figures Bruce and Dylan possessed or did not yet. Whenever I went anywhere with them in Stu's van, which he said he only needed to transport gear for his band, he would shout to whatever kids were there, "Let's boogie!" We didn't know about irony then, so we would emerge, giggling and dancing down the hall. "We're boogieing," we'd say. Bruce and Dylan were my friends by default, because I lived just down the hill and I was between their ages. Stu was kind to me, even when his boys weren't. What was so marvelous about the Toy Biz figures was you had no idea how they chose what characters to mold. Rather than merely crank out the ever-shifting membership of the X-Men, they were devoted to villains, however gaudy or zany. The only rules were vivid colors, cool swords, and some incarnation of Wolverine in each set. I had 2 Wolverine figures, so I had to pretend one was good Wolverine and the other one was evil Wolverine, and I had a Superman figure that I wasn't allowed to bring along when our X-Men characters fought a war. Superman had come with a kryptonite ring that I wore everywhere but at school. I remember it as translucent, radioactive green. But when I search for it now on collector sites, all the Superman figures of that era come back with little black plastic rings, an opaque green blob affixed to the front of each. They look really crude, not at all like the space jewel of a child's dream. My parents wouldn't have known who any of these characters were. At home, I asked my mother why Bruce and Dylan got so many action figures and I didn't. Mom said, "Maybe Stu just loves his kids more." She was always saying things like that. And what could I say? That it was evident she loved me less? Or she would have comprehended the uncontainable sadness I felt having to walk up to Bruce and Dylan's with one Wolverine in my clammy hand and to choose last from their bright heap of action figures when we had a war? The things, specifically muscular, garish-hued plastic toys, were in fact love? Honestly, I thought we were just poor. We lived lower on the hill, and as a kid I believed, not totally erroneously, that was how economic class worked. I couldn't have named what part of Calgary we lived in, but really, my parents were just normal and uncool and worried all the time. Dylan could draw superheroes with realistic muscles. Uniforms you actually believed were being strained by those muscles. I could sit and watch him draw for hours. Probably I was like a little bit in love with him. Bruce was in my grade. One of those kids born in January who grow up not even understanding their own athletic superiority. Once, when we were at an age when some kids, not me, already had bikes with shifters and handbrakes, while some poor losers, definitely me, still used little twerp pedal brakes, Bruce and this other kid, Christian, destroyed Bruce's bicycle. Bruce thought his parents would have to buy him a new grown-up one. I only heard this because his mother told my mother. He came home and said he crashed it on the hill down to your house, Jackie said. And you think he was lying? My mom asked. They were stopped in the middle of a quiet street, in their own station wagons, talking out of their windows like cops. I was in the back. Of course he lied. He wasn't hurt at all, and he was with Christian. Jackie said this last thing as though it was airtight evidence, which it was. The story fell apart pretty fast. They just rolled it down the hill over and over to damage it. I guess you won't be riding bikes with Bruce for a while, Mom hollered to the back seat in warning, then to Jackie. How are you going to punish him? Well, he can't just not have a bicycle, laughed Jackie. Mom nodded, thinking he could very much just not have a bicycle. You'll love this, Jackie said. Another car honked at them to move on. Stu found this junky bike for $5 at a garage sale. Bruce has to ride that until he outgrows it. Jackie inched forward. Time to boogie, as Stu says. Ciao. Obviously, Bruce tried to destroy the garage sale bike as well. They'll think it was so old it fell apart, Christian theorized. Christian had a rat tail haircut and never seemed to be at his own house. Did I want to try a real grown-up bike? Bruce asked. The temptation was so great that I ignored it was an obvious trap. I had already started down the hill between their house and mine when I realized I had no concept of how to stop. I pedaled hard backwards, but on the big bike this produced only a smooth and impotent swish of the chain. In the end, I chose my own front lawn to crash into. I knew what mossy part would be softest. I hadn't noticed Megan Drummond was there. Her Tercel was parked on the street, and when I crashed, she must have been leaning through the open window. She would have witnessed the weird kid from across the street shriek and fly off this too large bike, and then seen cooler kids from up the hill smoothly stop nearby and pretend innocence. Megan was just out of high school, and I dreamed about being her. I prayed most nights, but it seemed wrong to pray for this thing I wanted. So I just resorted to wishing. I would wish I could simply wake up 10 years older and a girl. Once I had seen her in what I thought was a bra, but it was likely a bikini top, and I fantasized about how it would feel to wear it, what a sense of importance it might convey. I conceived of no troubles an 18-year-old girl could possibly have. The wish was ill-defined. I don't think I thought of living my whole life as a woman, just of having the power with which Megan seemed imbued and skipping over what I knew would be some hard years for me. A year or two after this, as mysteriously as it had arrived, this wish that had been so deep that it was a physical ache dissipated, and I no longer murmured it into my pillow. Blake, you all right? She called out. I have no memory of what dumb thing I said back. One pedal had viciously scraped my shin, and the bright red blood was just beginning to form on it like dew. Bruce didn't ask me to play for weeks after my failure to destroy the $5 bike. Thanks.
I'm Michelle Yeoh, reading my poem To Become a Nest. The swallow came through the curtains while she slept, took a few strands of hair, the tip of her tongue, and a small triangle cut from just over her ribs. The bird wove these pieces into its nest, held within a fine architecture of mud. After she woke, a door fell open in her mind. She saw dust motes floating through beams of light that warmed the broken rafters. She smells a warm, ruminant smell, hears cycling crickets continue infinite in the circle of time. All day the swallows dive and hunt. They know she's there in the nest. They know she's watching. Sometimes at night, the moon slips through a hole in the roof and hangs glimmering in the corner of the barn. 5 eggs are laid in the nest made of her body. They hatch, all kneed, wet and naked in its shadowed interior. One fell featherless to the wooden planks. A tabby scoops it up and carries it away. The woman, the rest of her, still in her everyday life, lives half asleep in the march of everyday things. But she's also here, always in the barn. Sun follows moon, follows sun. It's cold now, and the swallows have left her just ahead of the first snow. She can't get warm. She's alone. She waits all the long winter for the swallows to come back, for it to be as it was, warm and full of promise.
Gravity. At first light, when there's no breeze, the birds still asleep, you can feel the motion of the earth as it lumbers around the sun. The roar of that star's great furnace can be heard above the chatter of silence in the woods as the trees sway, lead-footed dancers. Small children and pets are swept up into space by the force of the planet's motion, never to be seen again. Gravity is most effective for the obese. I was one of those seemingly lost, but my appetite for life saved me. I gorged on cosmic dust till my weight reached the critical point and I began to fall, slowly at first. The brilliant blue horizon stretched out below me like the comforter on my bed. Then faster and faster, plummeting through cloud thick as the cotton candy I ate at the fair. Falling finally back into myself. I stood for a moment, gathering my bearings, feeling the weight of life settle like a cloak on my shoulders. Then I got on with things. I could hear birds singing.
Hi, I'm Joe Bongiorno, and I'll be reading an excerpt from my story, Phoebe's Five-Finger Revolt. Thanks to the people at FreeFall for working with me on this one to get it to where it is. So from where I'll be reading, I'll just let you know that at this point in the story, the main character, Phoebe, has already gotten the taste and taken a liking to shoplifting. Here goes. Perfect, Phoebe thought. Heavy metal black leather. She grabbed the studded jacket from the rack and examined the price tag. Crap, she muttered. 65 big ones. She'd combed the aisles of the Value Village for weeks in search of new clothes to retire last year's wardrobe. She had gotten maximum mileage from her plaid skirt and Ramones t-shirt, worn for one too many casual Fridays. Even her Converse were unstitching and discolored from winter salt. Without a second thought, she folded the jacket over her arm and snuck to the used toy section in the corner of the store. She checked for security cameras, then stuffed it into her school bag, calmly, like Aunt Greta would have done. On her way to the exit, Phoebe spotted a brooch in the glass jewelry display. Stopping, she leaned in closer, nose almost touching the glass. A golden hammer and sickle. She had seen it somewhere before on a flag in a black and white documentary about the Russian Revolution. She could not say exactly what it meant, but something about the way they crossed each other screamed rebellion. The mustachioed man behind the counter scratched his cheek. See something you like? Phoebe counted the money in her wallet. Thanks to all she'd saved with her 5-finger discount, she had just enough. November wind gusted through the thin leather of Phoebe's new jacket. Her teeth chattered as she sat in the bleachers of the school's soccer field and coated her eyelashes with stolen mascara. The school bell rang, but Phoebe knew it would be a few minutes before Maritza arrived. Phoebe had feigned a stomachache that morning and stayed in her room, looking up hammer and sickle on the computer, while her father worked the saw in his workshop. Proletarian solidarity, Wikipedia explained, opening a new frontier of rebellion in her mind. The workers and peasants rose against the Tsar and the bourgeoisie, the article read. Her grandmother used to say that in Moldova, where she grew up, the government made sure everyone was fed. Phoebe watched the weather-worn Canadian flag flutter on the school flagpole, like old underwear hanging off a clothesline, until she saw Maritza appear from behind the bleachers. Phoebe changed her pose to show off her outfit. So, what do you think of the new look? Cool, said Maritza, dressed in full winter gear. Her voice was muffled by the scarf wrapped around her face. What's up with the pin? This? Phoebe pointed to the hammer and sickle on her lapel. It means, you know, the workers rising up against the bourgeoisie and stuff. Maritza squinted. The who? Ugh, never mind, she said, channeling her father's wrath. It's complicated. The whole system is rotten. Maritza rubbed her hands together. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm saying I think we should start our own little revolution. You want to give eyeshadow to the homeless? Phoebe clasped her hands. Her face lit up at the prospect of putting her newfound talents to use. Why don't we hit that place? She pointed to Marché Santé across the park. I mean, their prices are a joke. Stealing from capitalists isn't wrong. They steal from us first. Maritza shrugged her shoulders. Okay, but if I don't like where this is going, I'm bailing. The girls cut through the soccer field and entered the grocery store. Phoebe examined the prices of $3 a piece organic avocados and pinched a package of chicken breasts from the refrigerated aisle. She then picked up a bag of celery and, after looking both ways, shoved the produce into her unzipped school bag. Maritza came up to Phoebe from behind. Let's get out of here. The shoplifting duo strode past the cashier with lazy eye, crossed the street, and returned to their hideout behind the school field bleachers. Maritza removed a single item from her jacket. I only got these dried apricots. That weirdo's eye was creeping me out. Disappointed with her own yield, Phoebe unzipped her bag and removed the chicken and celery. Now what are we supposed to do with all this stuff? Asked Maritza. Phoebe looked around the cookie-cutter rows of semi-detached houses. Huh, aren't there any apartment buildings around here? Maritza lived in an apartment, Phoebe remembered. Did that mean her family was broke too? She had never gone inside, only seen the front of the building. Phoebe felt too shy to ask if she needed the celery, and besides, Maritza didn't say anything. Maybe we can leave them on someone's doorstep. Good idea. They walked a few blocks in search of the elusive apartment building. Phoebe considered taking the spoils home and putting them in the fridge, but figured her parents would notice the surprise produce. She thought of taking a bite of celery, but didn't find the dirt cake stalks or yellowing leaves particularly appetizing. Eventually, they left the food on the park bench and fled to the bus stop. Thank you.
Eddie Puskamoose showers history at the Main Street Ace Hardware. At its heart, the Bear Clan protects us, Puskamoose declares. Our peoples need aggression that modern Canada instead makes us smile at being inappropriate. He drops deck screws, clearance twine, 2 packs of thrills atop counter. Bears, cousins to spirits, creator lets loose to haunt our north. He says he's seen them, waking up on the static of his TV when Global goes off the air for the night. Bothered by post-anthem white noise, he knows they've come in season. In keeping with ancient teachings, town Cree like him don't follow. First saw them after a Scott Tournament of Hearts, heard hunger in their stirrings.
Visitor. I wait in line for a concert. The Asian couple behind me vent about white people's casual racism. Secretly, I laugh along, remembering, until her mom's from Ireland and her dad's from Hong Kong. So, she's still white. The verdict sears through my pale Irish flesh and embeds underneath my Chinese eyelids. The burnt stench reeks. Feet, arms, shoulders curl inward. The pavement is sullied by dirt mingling with the rain's remnants, pouring down cement, clinging to my boots. For them, I will never be enough. A perpetual other wedged between the Pacific and Atlantic. A foreigner with brown hair too light, eyelids too exotic. For me, I am enough. I build my home. My home is my body, swirled stars, and crushed earth. My home is my parents, my siblings. We eat rice and potatoes, beef stew, and dim sum.
So this is Vanishing Act. Saturday morning, a knock at the door. The man answers it. On his front step is a bear. No, 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 the man says, already shutting the door. It's too late. The bear, huge, shaggy, an unstoppable force, shoulders the door wide, and now it's filling the front hall. Hang on, the man says with an uneasy laugh. You can't just, A stink wallops the man's nostrils. Of cold nights, wandering in the rain, hunger, rooting in garbage heaps. He stifles a gag and realizes he had better handle this situation carefully. Since the circuses bowed to public pressure and let the animal performers go, they've gotten desperate for work, for an audience. He's heard of that recent incident in Parksville where a retiree got roughed up trying to shoo a tiger off his doorstep. The bear raises its head and snuffles with its big black nose, probably catching a leftover scent of bacon and eggs from breakfast. Here's the thing, the man says in his most calm and reasonable voice. I'm not really interested in a show, and I've got a lot on my plate today. I mean, a lot of work. So I think it's best if you just move along. Try somewhere else. No hard feelings, right? The bear grunts, a sound like a shove made of air. The man has never been the recipient of a grunt before. It's quite persuasive. All right, one trick, he says quickly. Just one. The man glances out the door to see if any of his neighbors are watching. The bear rears up on its hind legs. The top of its head brushes the chandelier and sets the crystal balls jingling. With surprising nimbleness, the bear turns in a circle, paddling its forepaws in the air as if beating time to some music the man can't hear. The man watches the bear and remembers going to the circus as a child. The elephants, how they riveted him with awe. The lions prowled in his dreams for days. Even there in that tawdry circus tent, under the glaring lights, they had kept some unknowable part of themselves. But the bears, they were different. Or not different enough. Too much like people, so easily led and eager to play along. They might have been people, he thought then, dressed up in bear costumes. He felt duped and embarrassed for the bears. It's been forever since he's been to a circus. The bear drops back down onto all fours. Wow, the man says. He resists the urge to clap. That would be too much encouragement. Yep, he says, I can tell you've really put in the time. And speaking of time, I've got a full day ahead. So... The bear pads over to a soccer ball sitting in a corner. It belongs to the man's son, who's out shopping with his mother for new shoes. Probably best they're not here to see this. The bear noses the ball with his snout and makes a kind of pleading woof, like an eager puppy. What are you? Nudge. Woof. The man gets it. He hesitates, considering his choices, then picks up the ball. He places it with great care on the tip of the bear's upraised nose, which is wet, alive, quivering, like another animal itself. He glances, in spite of himself, into the bear's eyes. Someone's in there, watching him. He backs away. The ball wobbles on the bear's long snout, but doesn't fall. The bear hefts itself onto its back legs again. The ball stays put. The bear turns in a circle. The ball doesn't fall. It's pretty impressive, you have to admit, if it's real. The bear extends its forepaws, lifts a hind leg, executes a clownish arabesque. Miraculously, the ball stays aloft. That must have been the big finish, because now the bear is carefully lowering itself back down onto all fours, still keeping the ball on its perch. At the last moment, a shudder runs through the bear's awkwardly balanced body. With a bleat, it lurches forward and belly flops onto the hardwood. The ball caroms off its back, bounces out the open door. The man feels hot shame rise to his face. For himself or for the bear, he's not sure.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. And congratulations to FreeFall for another fine issue of the magazine. Congratulations on all the magazines that this journal has been publishing over the years. It's a tremendous accomplishment. I am going to read a poem tonight, what I hope will be part of my the new book, the book I'm working on. It's still a while away. But as many of you know, my mother chose a medically assisted death in 2017. And I was there with her for the 12 days leading up to that event and the last hours of her life. The core of the new book is, I think, going to be about that experience, not just that experience itself, but reflecting on her life, the meaning of her life in light of it, and its meaning to me. So this is one of those poems from the reflective section of that book. Calligraphy. 3 days before her appointed death, my mother mourned that in my poetry she never lived, and then by heart recited into the memos on my phone 3 poems I had never heard before. Her voice is there today, though I have not yet played it back. But I have seen the child I was not, the young man who understood the kind of poems that would draw her out and into the body of his work. Every so often, he stopped writing his fascination with his father and heroic men, and wrote instead of what he saw when he watched her make the miso soups she was so proud of, or at her job in the school library she took so she could be like the woman she was years before he was born, but near him too, as he was growing up, more familiar with books than gym class. I see my mother and me now in the house we haunted together with people who never lived. And I want it to be true that every parent sees the ghost of the child their child could have been. As if written long ago, this could be the beginning of one of his poems in praise of his mother's skill at the calligraphy she learned in library school in England. The letters, fresh from her pen and unconfined by any word, still wet with future and with grace. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kayleigh Cline, and this is my poem, American Robin. Somewhere else, corpses of glass-slapped starlings are gathered on a white sheet in a skyscraper's shadow. Victims of modern architecture. But this robin chose to challenge his own reflection. Now he's splayed on the gravel in my flower bed, blinking, fighting to drive back the absence in his eyes like you did. Blinking up from the rocks after your sudden slide down that cliff. I will need a shoebox for this robin to keep him safe from cats while he recovers, or to bury him. Your stunned face lost its slack. You struggled to your feet. I told you to lie down, and I knew it had to be serious because for once you listened. The robin has pulled his wings against his body now. A good sign? Either way, more dignified. I ran behind the ATV while you were towed on a spinal board, not too immobilized for the occasional thumbs up, returning us to what we had always been. Our childhood, this running after you, taking down toys for you from 2 high shelves, stopping on every tree branch to pull you up beside me. Maybe you are not my whole world, but you are still a reflex, a habit. I will tuck the shoebox beneath the dogwood. This robin needs time to fly again, but I will not look inside until the morning, I think. Thank you so much.
This monarch can fly. 2 people in Port Colborne were different. One was Curtis Williams, who got picked on for being a funny boy. Curtis was a year younger than me. Like every kid in town, he spent summers swimming in the canal near the steps at 3rd Ferry. Johnny Ridgway once held Curtis's head underwater, as if that might stop him from liking boys. When Curtis played dead, Johnny eased up quick. Then Curtis kicked to get away and swam across to Second Ferry. He climbed out and never went swimming again. The other was Mary Mitchell. A few years older than me, she was born in the States, as a boy named Morris. Before finishing high school, she had all the work done, whatever that meant, and she looked good. Real good. She didn't get picked on as much, but we stared, mouths wide with wonder. We also snickered and stayed clear, as though she were contagious. Hard to believe a town as small as Port Colborne had room for characters like those two. Yet he lived on Stanley Street, and she was a block away on Ash. Some believed Curtis and Mary should get together and cancel each other out. We were that stupid back then. Though I knew about Mary from the day she moved to town, I only talked to her once. I was in the fraternity, Delta Zeta, and I had the 49 Monarch, so it must have been 57 or 58 when I was already out of school. My Uncle Lyle, who lived with us, bought the Monarch at an auction for $90. Lyle sold it to my dad, and I bought it from him. Paid him $5 a week for what seemed like an eternity. Steel blue with white wall tires, the car was a beauty when I first saw it, and a wreck before I was done. We weren't kind to that car. It was the town taxi. Anyone needing a lift called me. Like most cars before air conditioning, there were hinged, triangular vent windows on each side, but neither lasted long. The first got smashed when the keys were locked inside. The second went for the same reason. When we forgot, the other was already missing. The front and rear doors opened away from each other, rather than in the same direction. But 3 of 4 doors were jammed shut because the handles were missing, jarred loose by friends trying to get in or out after too many beers. The interior handle on the driver's side was the only surviving one. Monarchs were heavy cars, streamlined and solid, but I could make her fly. On Golf Course Road, there was a raised railway crossing. At the right speed, I'd get airborne, land with a bounce, and take off again. It was the most thrilling thing I could do at 18 or 19. When the Monarch was down to her last days, I went to Hudson's used cars. Tommy Hudson was running it then. I went to school with his kid brother, Kevin. I asked Tommy what he'd give for the Monarch as a trade-in. All he said was, "Give you $1 to get it off my lot." The fraternity owned a cottage at Morgan's Point. 6 or 7 boys lived there all summer, though it only had one big living area and a single bedroom. There was a dance hall on the point, always crowded with Americans. Mary was there one Saturday night. Not knowing anything about her, American men went after Mary, same as any local girl they planned on abandoning by Labor Day. Mary must have left before the dance ended. When the music stopped, 50 or 60 people flocked to the cottage. Some kept partying, others got sick on the front lawn. I woke the next morning in my car, with rain pelting down and someone knocking on the windshield. 2 fellas wanted a lift home. I told them to climb in. I pulled out, turned onto Lakeshore Road, and there was Mary, soaking wet, thumbing a ride. I spotted her bright pink lipstick 100 yards off. One of the guys rolled down a window and shouted, "Did you spend last night with a boy or a girl?" She changed her hitching thumb to a middle finger. I came back hours later after a long nap at my parents' place. In the heavy rain, it looked like a sodden tree stump stood on the gravel along the far side of the road. I drove past and spotted glowing pink lips in the rearview mirror. Mary hadn't moved. It was a gut punch to see her stranded after all that time. She had no umbrella. Her long hair and gray dress looked like tree bark. They were so soaked. Lakeshore Road was seldom busy, but there must have been a car every couple minutes at least. They all ignored her. 2 miles north, Highway 3 had more traffic and better odds of getting a ride. Or she could have walked to Port Colborne in half the time I was gone. But she was barefoot. She later told me she threw both shoes away after breaking a heel. At the cottage, I parked on the grass. 3 fraternity boys sat on the sheltered front steps, sharing a beer. "Where'd you get to, Ron? We've been waiting." All 3 got in, and I backed onto the road. A minute later, we turned on Lakeshore and spotted Mary. One of these guys also shouted at her. Asked her when Curtis was picking her up. I hated myself for leaving her there and rushed back after dropping everyone off. Mary still hadn't moved. I did a 3-point turn on the roadway, then pulled onto the shoulder. She stood on the passenger side. I can imagine what she thought of my junkyard car. Twice it passed her, with people shouting abuse. I leaned over, rolled down the window, and offered her a drive home. There is a lot more story to get to, but in order to read it, you're going to have to pick up the issue. Thank you.
This song is called Absolute Tears. Stories you tell, never told with words. And when you speak, it's an echo of a younger self. And your breath says absence, but I won't go. Your breath says absence, but I don't wanna go. Because absolute tears, I'll never forget my absolute fears. Because absolute tears are always caused by leaving here. You speak no evil, but you can't hear your own sin. And a hypnotic pill is keeping you still. Your mind says help, but I won't go. Your mind says help, but I won't go. Because absolute tears, I'll never forget my absolute fears. Because absolute tears are always caused by leaving here. I say now, I say now, I say now, oh no, no, oh no, no, oh. Thank you.
Thank you, readers. That was a wonderful evening. Thanks for sharing your work with us. Thank you, Eliot, for sharing your music with us. I hope everyone here enjoyed this as much as I did. FreeFall is available in bookstores across Canada. Of course, all the local bookstores in Calgary have it in stock now. You can also pick it up online. The raffle winners for the book giveaway will be announced after social media, or after the event on social media, so Twitter, Facebook, and then of course I'll reach out to those who win the raffle for some free books. I had a really lovely time. I really enjoyed myself. I hope you did too. Miss all your faces. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye.
On behalf of everyone at FreeFall Magazine, I would like to thank you so much for joining us this evening. It is because of you, the viewers and subscribers, that we are able to produce these celebrations of literature. Without you, none of this would be possible. I would also like to thank Crystal McKenzie and Michelin Mailer, without whom which none of this would be possible, because they organize and steer this ship. And Crystal and Michelin would also like to thank all the volunteers who make this possible. We could not do it without you. I would also like to thank FreeFall's sponsors, again, who we could not do this without. FreeFall's sponsors are Magazines Canada, the Alberta Magazine Publishers Association, Calgary Arts Development Association, the City of Calgary, the Alberta government, and the Canadian government. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.